per person. And the Commission also has compensatory payments in the pipeline. So I think it's too much bureaucracy, not free trade, that affects our farmers. Protectionism won't help us. And we won't be weakening climate protection. No, we'll be boosting it. Respect of the Paris Agreement is a major building block of this agreement. If we look at the EU, there are some 800,000 jobs linked to trade with Mercosur. My native Germany sends many goods. 12,000 companies from Germany send goods to the Mercosur countries. We've just heard from Mr. Šefčovič. There will be lower tariff duties, which will really boost companies. And there is a possibility for growth. And we will be able to access more critical raw materials that will help us with our climate goals, and it will make us less dependent on autocracies such as China. Let me be honest with you. I will not give in to the autocracies of this world. Those autocrats are standing shoulder to shoulder. We should work with other democracies. I am not willing to accept what's happening with autocracies. I don't want to have a spiraling situation. What we need more is more trade with trade partners that we trust. We don't need de-globalization. We don't need degrowth. Those are fantasies. We need Mercosur for jobs in the EU, for economic growth, and above all, for international cooperation. Thank you very much. The next speaker on behalf of the Greens is Ms. Bricmont.
Quand en Europe, comme dans les pays...
Well, in Europe and Mercosur countries, farmers and everyone is against this free trade agreement. We are seeing millions of people who are highlighting the environmental impacts and the climate and human impacts of this agreement. This is an agreement which dates back to the last century. It's not a new deal. But these millions of people are not important when it comes to the vested interests of economic agreements. It's expected an increase of 0.1% of GDP increase. How fantastic that is! But obviously we need to take out the millions for the compensation funds to mitigate the negative impacts for the world, the farmers, but not actually addressing the problems. There's also this rebalancing instrument for Mercosur agreements, will allow Brazilian agribusiness to contest our laws if they undermine their trade and economic interests. So, for example, there's the carbon border there's CBAM, there's the reforestation law, there's also due diligence law. So this is just undermining our strategic sovereignty and our economic security. We will not give up our for agriculture. We will not accept importing a range of products which aren't allowed in Europe. We will not allow. We will not give people glyphosate or poultry with bird flu. We need to be clear about one thing. This is a tax that is worse than 2019. In 2019, we said we couldn't ratify the Mercosur agreement. Now we have a worse tax. We're defending these values which protect our citizens and protect economic prosperity. We want partnership with Mercosur, but we want a fair partnership. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön. Für die Fraktion der Linken spricht die Kollegin.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the left, I give the floor to Ms. Aubry.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, how can you come here and defend the Mercosur agreement? It's the largest and worst free trade agreement the EU has ever signed. How can you dare to tell our farmers, who are already struggling to make ends meet, that importing hundreds of millions of extra tons of beef, cheese or chicken will have no impact on them? How do you dare deliberately expose our people to pesticides and GMOs that are banned in Europe? Because there's not going to be any reciprocity in standards. We're seeing an environmental crisis, and you're defending an agreement that's going to speed up deforestation and climate change. You should be ashamed, Commissioner. You should be ashamed, because the reality is that no one wants this agreement. And you're here again, and you're trampling on the consultation rights of the Parliament. And yesterday, we saw serious concerns about this agreement. The vote showed that there's no real majority for it. This is going to devastate the planet and cause massive problems for our people. Now, the battle is not over here. You can count on us to destroy the agreement.
Für die ESN-Fraktion spricht der Kollege.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the ESN group, I give the floor to Mr. Stoyanov.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Commissioner, the free trade agreement between the EU and Mercosur provides economic opportunities for the EU, but it can have catastrophic consequences for our agriculture. There is lack of transparency on the process of ratification, as well as on the safeguards envisaged by the European Commission. €1 billion were mentioned, but it is not clear where this money will be sourced from or whether it will be enough. It is not clear either whether this fund will be founded now already or after the agreement enters into force. I'm afraid that the money will not reach the ones who need it, or that when it reaches them, it will be too late. It will also involve a complicated and bureaucratic process to fund the ones damaged. Let us not betray our producers once again.
Sprecher, ich bitte die.
Thank you very much. If you want to speak under Catch the Eye, then let it be known, because I'm going to shut Catch the Eye in a minute, because there's so many people who want to take the floor, and I have to be quite strict with the timing. Now, the next speaker is Mr. Mato.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. The EU-Mercosur agreement is not just another free trade agreement. It's trying to look to the future. We need to be a relevant actor in global trade. We need to create growth and employment and to open up to a market of over 700 million people. Now, there are clear benefits. For example, there's 4 billion reduction in customs duties. There's also better trade for our SMEs. Now, having said that, I do understand, I do echo the concerns of the agricultural sector. We cannot ignore them, but we need to be clear. The problem of agricultural sector is not Mercosur, it's the common agricultural policy at an EU level, which has been designed without taking into account the reality in rural areas. If our farmers are against this, it's because the common agricultural policy does not allow them the tools to compete, and this needs to change. So rather than blocking this agreement, we should reform our agricultural policy so it doesn't penalise our farmers with overwhelming rules, and we need to protect the vulnerable sectors effectively. We need to ensure there's a fair compensation fund and make sure that it actually works and that it's tailored to the situation. It's not a question of choosing between trade or agriculture. It's a question of doing things well and using up-to-date data, looking at the source of the problem and finding solutions. We need to ratify this agreement. If we don't, we won't actually address our problems, but it will just say that Europe doesn't want to be a leader in this world and it wants others to take our opportunities.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Lange.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Lange.
Herr Kommissar, meine lieben
Chair, Commissioner, it's dishonest to point the finger and say that Europe can save the world, but we need to strike deals with other partners, eye to eye, on a level footing. That includes working with Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, working with them to protect biodiversity, climate, and employers. We can only do these things together, not by pointing our finger, Europe pointing the finger, no. And defensive interest. Well, what did Lenny Kravitz say? It ain't over till it's over. As it's not over yet, we can still change things. If we want to change things, if we want to amend, if we want to add, we can still change things. We've done that with other trade deals in the past. We are a power, and we can ensure that this is a good deal. We need stable agreements in this global world that is characterized by conflict, where there isn't necessarily stability. But let's not forget, 40% of our GDP depends on international trade. Without that, we cannot survive. We would be squandering our welfare states. And we don't want to do anything that will benefit the autocrats of this world. Let's discuss, let's improve this text, but let's be part of it. Mr. Langer, would you accept a blue card from a colleague Jud?
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege, dass Sie die Frage annehmen.
Well, thank you for accepting the blue card. Well, I heard you quoting Lenny Kravitz, but I'd rather have heard a quote from our farmers rather than Lenny Kravitz. But anyway, now the chairman of the German Farmers Association, Joachim Kukwitz, says that we farmers are not being listened to. This agreement is one-sided. It's going to damage farmers and weaken our businesses in competition. That's the opposite of what the Commission says it wants to do. It talks about strengthening European agriculture. The measures to protect our agriculture are insufficient. What would you say to those people, to German farmers?
I spoke with farmers last week for 2 hours. Let's talk about the facts. If you look, the German farmers, the European farmers have a trade surplus of 65 million euros in the agri-sector. So it's in the interest of farmers to export. If we look at Mercosur, we have possibilities for our dairy, for our cheese and for our alcoholic drinks. We also must tell the truth. We already import 3 million tons of soya, and that is cheap soya. And we use that soya to feed our cattle and our pigs. So that's also part of it. We need to look at the facts. You have another blue card from Ms. Brickman. Will you accept that as well?
You said that Europe cannot impose its social and environmental standards to the rest of the world. And we have had the debates here in this House together. You were a rapporteur of the Sustainable Development Chapters reform under the last mandate. And together we decided that we would go for binding TSD chapters, which are completely absent in the current agreement with the Mercosur countries. So how do you explain that? How can you accept that your own reform is not integrated in this deal?
Saskia, you are not correct. Indeed, I'm really proud that the Commission took over my proposal for a binding, strong sustainability chapter in June 2022. And in this agreement, in the proposal by the Commission, the requirements, the obligations for sustainability are binding. The only issue is how we can really sanction this. And there we have some differences. And let's see how the Parliament will develop their own position in the next months. But the obligations, they are binding in this agreement.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Stancanelli.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. It's been economically proven that free markets bring economic benefits and well-being. So that's something that we're in favour of in principle. But agreements need to be fruitful for both sides, and that's not the case for the Mercosur agreement. Farmers are desperately trying to make us understand the serious impact that this agreement could have on their activities. Our farmers would be in a position of economic disadvantage. They wouldn't be able to compete with large South American farmers. In addition, you've got a massive contradiction in the Commission. On one hand, there are stricter rules being placed on our farmers, but on the other hand, they're allowing our markets to be invaded by products that aren't respecting the standards imposed in Europe in terms of environmental and social sustainability and sanitary and phytosanitary product use. So we think that, okay, free trade agreements do provide benefits, but the Mercosur agreement, as it's structured, damages our farmers, cattle breeders, producers and consumers. Perhaps it would be best not to close ourselves in our ivory towers and to go out there and listen to our farmers who work the land and produce wealth. Thank you.
Kollege Kurz.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Coles.
Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, trade agreements aren't just about tariffs and paperwork. They create real opportunities. For our SMEs, this means access to 260 million consumer market. So far, all EU trade agreements have delivered benefits while maintaining high standards. It's a fact. This deal does the same, lowering tariffs, cutting red tape, and ensuring fair competition. Yes, concerns exist. That's why the Commission has announced a €1 billion fund to support affected farmers. But if we can fund compensation, we should also fund opportunity. A one-stop EU platform should be established for Mercosur markets that will help our businesses expand without excessive costs, because access shouldn't be a privilege but a policy priority. Commissioner, you must ensure structured engagement similar to CFSP and CSDP. We should have a CTP conference during every presidency where the civil society, where national parliamentarians can engage with the European Parliament and with the Commission. This is a chance to expand, compete and lead, and we should take it. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Als nächste spricht die Kollegin Vedre.
Thank you. Mrs. Vidren now, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. German cars against French agriculture. Some people want to turn the EU-Mercosur trade agreement into this equation. To my colleagues, above all my German colleagues, I will not use this way of working. It's a political weakness which just leads to protectionism. It just leads to bigger divides. This is not a fight between European countries, but it's our credibility to build sustainable partnerships with third countries who we dialogue with and we already trade with. It's not an opposition between different sectors, but it's our commitment to evolve value chains so that they can be sustainable and safe. So we need to move beyond this issue. But the question is, do we, the Europeans, can we control the products which are coming into our market? So let's not leave our sovereignty and our competitiveness to become vague concepts which are not linked to the reality of the sectors of our economy and our citizens.
Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Macebania.
Pueden hacer trampas al solitario.
Commissioner, don't try to pull the wool over our eyes. Don't say this is good for the agri sector, but then we have to give more compensation to the agri sector. If it's good, why do we need to compensate the agri sector? Second question. In this Mercosur agreement, there are two things that are hard to believe. So you say that you've got the green light from all farmers in Europe and you got the green light from all farmers in the Mercosur bloc. And what about the trade unions? So who is this going to benefit? Who is this going to benefit? The farmers, the workers? It's not going to benefit Europeans. We will be more dependent on big multinationals. The multinationals are the only ones who are going to emerge victorious. That's why we're firmly against this. We need more focus on employees. We need more investment to make Europe stronger. We need more investment in European farming. We mustn't be more vulnerable and dependent on third parties, especially multinationals.
Spricht der Kollege Flanagan.
Thank you. Mr. Flanagan now, please.
In order to properly debate the impact of this proposed agreement,
proposed agreement, the title doesn't say proposed, we haven't agreed to it yet, the proposed agreement on beef farmers in the EU, we need to compare like with like. In other words, you cannot compare carcass weight to processed premium beef weight, but that's what your spin doctors are doing. The reality is that this deal will guarantee that at least 9% of high-value cuts sold in the EU will come from Mercosur, 209,000 tonnes in a market of 2.3 million. I hear people talk of opportunities. If you're a suckler farmer in the west of Ireland on a 30-hectare farm, where is the opportunities? If it's a win-win, as you say, why then the need for a compensation package? And if there's money, and $1 billion for a compensation package, how come there's no money to increase the farmers' money that they get from CAP from what it was in 1991? Farmers in Ireland are facing a 60% cut in CAP payments since that year. You're talking about a $1 billion compensation package for something that's a win-win deal. There is no win-win. No win-win in science. You cannot destroy or create energy. It's rubbish.
Danke. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Bausemann.
Thank you. Mr. Bausemann next, please.
Sehr geehrte Frau Vorsitzende.
President, ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, it's an error to make policy which is against European citizens. It's an even bigger mistake to do something which goes against those who feed us, farmers. Farmers produce wholesome goods in the EU, and what they do is unique. And what we hear is false. There is no competitiveness. There is no competition. If you compare our standards, our quality standards, with the lower Mercosur standards. I am also a small-scale farmer. It's my second job, and I stood side by side with farmers during protests in Brussels and in Strasbourg. Where were you? Where was the Commission? You sent the police in because you're scared to talk to farmers. You're scared to talk to farmers. The ESN colleague just quoted the head of the German Farmers Union. The head of the German Farmers Union said, we cannot compete with these Mercosur products. They will flood our market. This is the wrong path to take. Our responsibility is to ensure that farmers in Europe can bring their product to market. We hear some in this House, and particularly the Greens, who say that we can get zinc, iron, and high-quality protein. You know, they want you to eat yellow mealworm. The Greens want you to eat yellow mealworm instead of high-quality meat. That's what the Greens say. Then I hear, and I say to the EPP, let's ignore the Greens, let's leave them to the side. Let's not let that kind of policy be our policy. Let's have policy that is in favour of European citizens. And now I look to Germany. If we are part of a German government, if we are part of a German federal government, we would never let this kind of agreement pass. And let me tell you, we are standing side by side with farmers. We're actually at the forefront during protests, and we want to prevent this agreement. Would you accept a blue card from Miranda Paz? Yes, I'll take it.
Danke, Präsidentin. Ich bin eine
Thank you, President. Well, I'm from Galicia. We have many farmers there. You come from a fascist party. You don't have a right to talk about the Green Group, I'm afraid.
Karten sind dazu da, Fragen zu stellen.
Well, blue cards are there for questions.
My question is, you have spoke about affirmations very strange. No, you change the products with the animals. I don't understand. So why you are you doing this kind of affirmations?
Also ich glaube, Sie verstehen vieles.
I think there's some things you've misunderstood. That's why your question is so confusing. I'm not from a fascist party. I don't know what spectrum you're from, a S&D kind of thing. Well, your colleague just spoke about Lenny Kravitz. It ain't over till it's over. But another Lenny Kravitz song is Fly Away. I mean, maybe you should fly away because all the votes are flying to us.
Nach einer kleinen Umbaupause, nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin Roth.
Mrs. Roth-Neveďalová now, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, there is no ideal agreement, just a compromise and the art of the possible. And when you talk about farmers, I don't know where you were when we were talking about the Slovak and Eastern farmers who are being flooded with Ukrainian products. I think we should be pragmatic in this case. When we decrease the burden on our farmers, we would help them. We should increase their salaries, create new jobs, support the industry. And this is exactly what this agreement is offering us. I think it's an opportunity for our economy because we are export-oriented and we need to find new export markets, just like the Commission has said, focus on tariffs, on taxes, for our cars, which are very important for Slovakia, for instance. I think this is a great opportunity and this is a positive side of this agreement. For 20 years, this has been negotiated. I think it's high time. I think we should be really pragmatic, look at the positives that this agreement can bring. And just remember what the Commissioner said. We are talking here about the quality of our foodstuffs. We do not want to diminish our standards. The Commissioner has said that the standards will be maintained. This will be included in the agreement. So let's not lie to our voters and to our listeners, please.
Dankeschön. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Stier.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Stier.
Dear colleagues, at a moment where the world economy is being fragmented, for Europe it is of strategic importance to ensure that we have trading partners with a regulated relations through agreements. In this circumstance, the Mercosur agreement is especially important for our relations with Latin America. And if we have a shared history and culture, without this agreement, Europe will not be able to handle ever-growing competition from global players who are present in Latin America. And not only present, China is the first trading partner for a lot of countries within this region. So there is no doubt that this agreement is necessary. Yes, for European industry, but in general for European economy. At the same time, it is true that there is a need of a dialogue with farmers. For Croatian Agricultural Chamber, there are three special sectors: poultry, sugar and beef. And for this reason, it is important to communicate that we have quotas agreed on import of these products between 1.2 to 2.5% of total European market consumption. And with these small quotas, they will even be introduced slowly. So our market will not be flooded with products from Latin America, but we still need a compensation measure package which could be activated in case of need. So Mercosur is no threat, but it is an opportunity to make Europe competitive on a global market. Thank you.
Spricht der Kollege Heineloma.
Thank you. Mrs. Heineloma, please. Mr. Heineloma.
Madam President, the new U.S. administration is turning again to protectionism and wants to weaponize trade politically. In this situation, it is particularly important that the EU keeps defending free trade and opens up new opportunities for fair trade agreements that recognize environmental and social responsibility. If the Mercosur agreement will become reality, it would create the largest free trade area in the world, opening up a market of nearly 300 million people to European companies. Free trade, however, needs fair rules, not only on the environment, but also labor and consumer rights must be guaranteed. The EP now has to ensure a requirement to comply with the Paris Agreement is included in the agreement. We have to make sure that the agreement is equitable for European farmers and workers. Only after this can the EP, European Parliament, grant its consent to this agreement.
Vielen Dank. Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin Deloge.
Thank you. Mrs. Deloge now, please.
Ce traité de libre-échange entre
Well, this free trade agreement between the EU and South America is actually a threat for our farmers, our environment and our economic sovereignty. This agreement pits our farmers in direct competition with an area where sanitary standards are lower. You're sacrificing our farmers to sell German cars. Latin America it bases its trade on intense exportation, environmental degradation. We are going to see our producers weakened to the benefit of large multinationals. This is an environmental disaster. We need to defend local sustainable agriculture. Did you know that every 2 days a farmer in France commits suicide? Commissioner von der Leyen and any members of the European Parliament who sign this agreement will be banging the last nail into their coffin.
Card. There are 2 blue cards. No. Okay. Dann ist der nächste Redner der Kollege Jaki.
Our next speaker is Mr. Jaki.
Dziękuję, pani przewodnicząca.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, all of what you are saying about Mercosur reminds me of the situation with Nord Stream. We have been saying for years that you cannot give up on diversification of gas supply because it will end in tragedy. And what are you going to do today? You want to destroy the European agriculture because you want to sell more cars. The problem is that agriculture is not just food, it's also the question of our security. If that is such a good deal, why do you need compensation? You think that we can always import food to Europe from afar. The same thing happened with gas. And what can you say now about what happened with importing gas? Or maybe we all want to eat insects, but maybe not all of us. Farmers deserve our gratitude because of them we have the best food in the world and we should not destroy it.
There is a blue card. Would you accept a blue card by colleague Warborn?
Thank you. You said that the agreement will destroy the farmers. That is absolutely not true. Look back at the CETA agreement, which was actually beneficial for the farmers, even though a lot of people said that it will destroy the farmers. The Commission has, on the other side, made a very good job. They have TRQs, they have safeguards, and they have a compensation package. How can you say that it will destroy farmers when we recognize that there are sensitive products, but that's why the Commission has worked with this. This will help the farmers. It is beneficial for the wine sector, for cheese, for a lot of businesses.
Jeżeli to jest tak, jak pan mówi.
If it's so, if you think that the farmers will gain from this agreement, why are they protesting? Are they stupid? You know better what they're doing than they do themselves? And there is a logical mistake in your thinking. If they are to gain from this agreement, why the compensation package? So I'm really sorry, but I heard the same story here when Nord Stream was discussed. You said there would be no problem. Agriculture is about our security, simply.
Our next colleague is Mrs. Carlsborough, please.
Fru talman, kommissionär Šefčovič,
Madam President, Commissioner Šefčovič, dear colleagues, for 25 years the European Commission has been negotiating this Mercosur trade agreement. And finally, we have an agreement on the table. Now, some people want to stop this agreement, but why? Why do you want to allow these people to go towards Russia and China? These negotiations began in a different time. The world was focusing on the millennium bug in the year 2000, but now there's other factors which are important. 25 years later, we are in a period of global uncertainty. European competitiveness means that we need to reduce our vulnerability when faced with crises. We need to build industry, and we need to build our services and agricultural sector. We want trade agreements with other blocs around the world. We want human-based relations. When we're seeing the US trying to start a trade war, we agree.
Accept them. First one is from colleague Toussaint.
Madame Casbro, bonjour.
Mrs. Casbro.
At the side, just a moment. Yes.
Madame Casbro, chers collègues.
Colleagues, Madame Casbro, you say you don't understand why some are opposed to this Mercosur deal, but you obviously support it. And yet, signing this deal with Mercosur and implementing it is tantamount to saying to farmers who are suffering, who are dying out, who get very little profit, that we're now going to get them to face even stiffer competition in sensitive sectors. What about parents whose children suffer from cancer because they've been exposed to toxic products? Isn't it going to be even worse? A question, please, asked for the chair. Aren't you saying to European farmers that Javier Milei is doing the right thing, this chainsaw set of policies? You think that Argentina is a reliable partner? That's why we're against this. And why aren't you?
Please, colleagues, the blue card is there to ask questions. So please, I mean, you can elaborate, but then come to some sort of question, please.
Jag tycker det är väldigt bra att vi får höra ett sånt.
I think this agreement is favorable. It's good to have an example of how information is shared in politics. Saying that this agreement is going to give people cancer and people are going to die, but where are you getting this information from? You should be ashamed. Stop lying. The forecasts say that Europe needs competitiveness in all sectors, including in the sector of agriculture. We need growth.
To elaborate, so the next one is by colleague Bernhuber. 335.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank.
Well, yes, thank you very much. I perhaps want to say something about farmers. You say, and I'm talking about crop farmers. I mean, there are farmers who are going to suffer. There are many different kinds of farming, so you have to look very carefully at which kind of farming, which sector is going to be disadvantaged by this agreement. And I don't really understand why agriculture isn't simply taken out of the agreement, because that's the crucial sector, and a crucial sector where there are massive concerns.
Vi lever i en värld där vi är beroende av varandra.
We live in a world where we depend on each other. European agriculture depends on inputs, depends on fuel that are imported from elsewhere in the world. This is a part of the debate that people are just ignoring. We depend on other countries. The better the cooperation we can have with other countries, and the better things will be for everyone. The more we will win, more we will wake up and drive the economy. People are denying the fact that this agreement leads to commercial benefits when it has points which are very good for European agriculture.
Nein? Okay. Dann Frau Kollegin Riba-Ichiner war ein Versehen. That was it, thanks.
Okay, so the last blue card wasn't used. So, Mr. Weitz now, please.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, have you been listening to the family farmers on both sides of the Atlantic that urge us not to sign this trade agreement? Or have you been listening to the big land-owning oligarchs that are teaming up with the agrochemical multinationals that run thousands of hectares big farms spreading pesticides that are banned in Europe with airplanes? Have you been listening to the indigenous communities and Quilombo communities that came all the way to Brussels to report about their poisoned rivers, their poisoned wells, their burned down forests, the deforestation and the attacks on them? Have you been listening to the labor organization that report about child labor, about forced labor, but in very high numbers? Yes, we need to increase our cooperation with Mercosur. Yes, we need to increase our cooperation with democracies. But as it stands, this trade agreement, in my point of view, is not fit for purpose. We still need to work on that and need to improve it. As it stands, this trade deal is toxic for the planet and the people. Thank you very much.
Danke. Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin Boylan.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Miss Boylan.
Mercosur is a rotten trade deal that's widely opposed by the public across Europe, and they're not buying what the Commission is trying to sell. Irish beef farmers are already struggling to be viable, and this deal will push them over the edge. It's also, as others have said, a massive step backwards on our climate commitments. The Commission has blatantly set aside our climate and biodiversity commitments to push through a deal that will increase emissions and deforestation. This is a bad deal for people and planet, with carve-outs for the Mercosur countries on the EU DR. This deal is a licence to continue killing the Amazon forest. It will paralyse future environmental legislation, giving Mercosur countries the power to challenge EU environmental measures, which will have a devastating chilling effect. From a public health point of view, does the Commission seriously believe that people in Europe want to eat food that's produced with chemicals that have been banned for years? So I'm calling on people, protect the people, protect the planet and stop this rotten trade deal.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Myanmar.
Thank you, Madam President. The international community is fragmented. There's increased polarisation around the world, and there's an increase in protectionism. Now, that is the context, and so therefore it is opportune for the EU to strengthen its economic relationship with the Mercosur countries. We have so many links with these countries. These are natural allies for us. We still don't have the final political cooperation dialogue part of this agreement, but we think it will allow instruments to better improve our policies to allow us to address global and shared challenges, such as the fight against climate change and the fight against drug trafficking. The Mercosur agreement will also allow us to counter the Chinese presence in the agreement. It gives us many opportunities for European businesses. The agreement puts an end to the traditional protectionist policies of certain countries such as Brazil and Argentina, and also facilitates availability of European products in Mercosur agreements. We need a permanent dialogue with those sectors which are either threatened or also those who benefit. We need to highlight the true reach of the agreements. There's compensation, there's TRQs, there's a range of different instruments, and we also need to have reforms in the EU which reduce bureaucracy and ensure competitiveness of sectors which have been over-regulated. Hopefully the competitiveness compass can also contribute to this, so there's still a lot of work to be done.
Do you accept a blue card by colleague Penel? Then please, 776.
Oui, bonjour, chers collègues. Vous nous avez présenté.
Well, yes, good afternoon, colleague. Will you have said all the things that the EPP finds good about this agreement, but I have a simple question for you. When you go back home, what are you going to be able to do to explain to farmers that this Mercosur agreement is a good one? How are you going to tell them that they're not facing unfair competition? How will you explain to them that you're putting them up against people who don't respect the same rules? What are you going to say to farmers?
If you listened carefully, perhaps there's problems with interpretation, but I've said I'd have spoken to our farmers and explained the reality of the agreement. I explained quotas, the compensation, which has already been in the agreement, and also said that we need to implement reforms in our internal legislation, because I know very clearly that the farming sector has been the victim of over-regulation for many years now, when competitiveness has been taken into account. And I hope that you heard this. I said this to the Commissioner as well. I hope that the competitiveness compass needs to include our farmers as well. They're sick of overregulation. That's the only thing I agree with you on.
Da wir viele blaue Karten haben, ein Hinweis an die Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
We have many blue cards. Can I just point out to colleagues, there's a headset so that you can hear interpretation. The headset is at the podium. The next speaker is Mr. Benefei.
Mercosur è un'intesa.
The Mercosur agreement is very important in geopolitical terms and could lead to a new balance for the EU. It could be a way of us boosting the EU presence in Latin America and challenging the influence of other superpowers. However, deciding on whether we're going to vote in favour means we have to assess its effects on workers, farmers, the environment, and ensuring that clear and shared rules are respected. Inserting the Paris Agreement in the sustainability chapter is a positive step, but there are things that still need to be looked at. The rebalancing mechanism, dispute resolution, the effectiveness of anti-deforestation measures, and also the need to boost customs systems to ensure safety for consumers and in the internal market. Now, as the S&D Group, we've launched discussion with the Commission, NGOs and social partners to assess every aspect of the agreement. Now, I'm turning to the Commission here. We have a year to provide a response as an institution to the issues raised by Europeans. We need to be convincing in acting on the issues that remain with measures that can persuade the Parliament that this agreement is a good one. We need to work together on this, and then we'll be able to take an appropriate decision on the way forward. Thank you.
Nästa kollega Moreira de Sá.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Moreira de Sá.
Senhora Presidente, Senhor Comissário.
President, colleagues, we are in favour of free trade, and we recognise its benefits for economic growth and prosperity. But let's look at the errors made in the last century. We don't want to repeat them again. They happened in the 20s and 30s. We think that there are geopolitical advantages to this Mercosur agreement. It would stymie further growing Chinese influence. But we are concerned about what could happen to our farmers, our fishers, our industry, and the SMEs who are the backbone of our economy. We are always in contact with those companies that are affected by this agreement, but no one knows the reality of what's happening better than them. They have legitimate concerns. They're worried about the competition of third countries which don't comply with the same security and quality and safety standards as we do. We need to ensure a level playing field and fairness. We need to ensure that our productive sectors are safeguarded, and we will work hard to ensure that happens. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Van Dijk.
Dank u, voorzitter, commissaris.
Thank you, Madam President, commissioners, colleagues. I welcome this agreement. This is the largest trade agreement that the EU has ever signed, but it's also very important for three reasons. Right now, President Trump wants to put tariffs on our steel and aluminium. Now is the time to look for new markets. We should not just allow China to have all the markets in the world. Secondly, it's a trade agreement based on rules. Thirdly, it also improves the working conditions in the fight against climate change. However, I also understand the concerns of our farmers. There's obviously going to be an increase in competition. However, we need agreements. We urgently need agreements which ensure sanitary and phytosanitary standards for our products. So, yes, we can believe in the Mercosur agreement.
The next speaker is Mr. Kassar.
À plusieurs reprises, nous avons...
Commissioner, well, we've several times warned of the impact of the Mercosur agreement on deforestation, the loss of biodiversity, and phytosanitary risks. Let's now look at the impact of the agreement on our strategic autonomy. The Draghi report highlighted the effectiveness of the United States and China when compared to Europe. But nevertheless, both of these powers have decided to protect their markets and their farmers to ensure that they have food sovereignty. Let's recall that the world population continues to increase. That's more mouths to feed. And being able to produce your own food is a key pillar of strategic autonomy. However, only 6% of farmers are less than 35 years old in the European Union. Commissioner, is it really reasonable to open the door to less sustainable products from South America, particularly at a time when young people do not want to become farmers? This agreement is nothing like CETA, which was a good agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Vieira.
Dear Chair, dear Commissioner, time flies when you're having fun, and with Mercosur we've been negotiating for 25 years. But here in the European Parliament we were a bit late to the party as we only had the access to the final text after a political deal was announced in December. This agreement raises a lot of questions. How exactly will we ensure that it will not drive deforestation in the Amazon? Or that the rights of local and indigenous communities will be respected? Or why do we have a deal on the table that increases imports of poultry and beef without presenting conditions on animal welfare? And what about the rebalancing mechanism? Can it be used to challenge the European deforestation regulation? And if so, what would that mean for future trade deals with other partners or future environmental rules that we want to set? Let me be clear. With Trump's trade policies, Europe needs to diversify its trade partners, but this cannot be done at any cost. We need a strategic agreement that works for both the planet and the people here and in Mercosur countries. And the jury is very much still out on whether this deal can deliver that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Raqueta.
The EU-Mercosur agreement is designed to enrich the bosses of corporations in Frankfurt or Buenos Aires at the expense of locals and farmers in the countryside on both sides of the Atlantic. It is a deliberate attack on workers' rights, on indigenous communities, on family farmers, but also on entire ecosystems and a stable climate. This agreement has already derailed the EU's deforestation regulation. It is also a blueprint for further deregulation pushed by the Commission. Everything for the wealthy and no rules to prevent exploitation. Instead, this deal plants the seeds of famine. This deal is expanding the same destructive agriculture that pollutes soils, water and atmosphere, that impoverishes farmers and peasants for the profits of agribusiness. Our biodiversity is crashing and temperatures are rising, and this deal means racing faster towards the abyss. And we have to stop this deal and listen to the proposals of small-scale farmers and agricultural unions in the EU and in the Mercosur countries. They do not want this deal.
Danke. Nächster Redner ist der Kollege Dorfmann.
The next speaker is Mr. Dorfmann.
Kolleginnen und Kollegen, mit dem
Colleagues, with Mercosur, the EU has an agreement with a partner whose biggest priority is agri-goods. But we already buy 5 billion euros worth of goods from Argentina, 17 billion from Brazil. But I know that sugar, bioethanol, rice, citrus fruit, beef and poultry, they're all concerned by this sector. But there are opportunities elsewhere. There's no doubt about that. And of course, we have a geopolitical interest in signing this agreement. The EU at the moment is losing out. We're losing partners and friends throughout the world. You know, we hesitate too much. It's taken us 25 years to get Mercosur over the finish line. I think Mercosur is a symbol. But we cannot allow ourselves to squander the opportunities afforded by our partners. But we need a strategy for farming. A strategy cannot just be a promise for a few euros. We need to have a true concept for farmers. We need to have measures which will allow farmers to conquer new markets. And then we need funding so that they can conquer those new markets. But first you come up with the concept, then you come up with the funding. So Commissioner, please come up with some concept which will help our farmers and which will assuage their fears. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Assis.
Muito obrigado, Sra. Presidente. Sr.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. This is a good agreement for the EU from a political point of view, an economic point of view. It's also good from a trade point of view. The EU should be trying to strengthen its bond with Mercosur countries. We have deep historic links, cultural links, political links with these countries. We're talking about a number of democracies. We need to move forward with this agreement. We need to make sure we're not falling back into protectionism, and we need to show that we are open. A free trade agreement is one that tries to regulate our relationship with this part of the world. We want an open Europe. Europe needs to reach out to other countries in the world. We need raw materials that we don't have on our continent. We need to set up trade agreements that will drive our economies, and that's why it's absolutely vital to ensure that we finalise this agreement. But there is one thing that is important here. It's legitimate to be against this agreement. Unfortunately, I think for some on the left, but lots on the right, a lot of people are falsifying the reality. People are trying to create fear. Let's have a serious debate based on facts, based on what is included in the agreement, not what some people want others to believe that is in the agreement. This is an agreement which should be voted on. This is the start of a discussion, and we have to do this with rigour.
Colleague Aziz, you've had a hell of a time, but there's still a blue card by colleague Oliveira. Do you accept that?
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Mr. Assis, if this is such a good agreement, then why is the Commission stopping the Member States from carrying out national scrutiny? Why has the Commission split this agreement in two so that there's no scrutiny by the Member States? Doesn't this confirm what we've said about the environmental, economic and social standards? What about farmers' fears? They're worried about their economic livelihood being destroyed because they have lower costs in the Mercosur countries. You don't ignore these concerns.
I'm not downplaying the democratic importance of this agreement. The agreement is going to be discussed and voted on here in the European Parliament, and this European Parliament is the expression of the people of Europe. The agreement is, as I see things, a good agreement. It protects the key European interests. There will be certain sectors that lose, and there's always a risk in certain agreements. So we need to find safeguard instruments, and that's what's in there. So this is what I'm saying. There are certain people trying to create fear with certain sectors of the population, which that does not serve the interests of those that we're supposed to be protecting.
There's a second blue card by colleague Flanagan.
You accused MEPs from the left of telling lies about this agreement. What lies are you referring to? Do you think that after this agreement,
Excuse me, there is no translation? You got it?
Yes.
You accuse people on the left of telling lies about this agreement. It's one hell of a claim to make. What lies are you referring to? Is it a lie to say that as a result of this agreement, 9% of all high-value beef cuts being sold in the EU will come from Mercosur? Is that a lie? Is it a lie to say that we don't have €1 billion compensation to pay farmers? Is it a lie to say it isn't a win-win when suckler farmers in Europe are definitely going to lose, and if dairy farmers are going to win in Europe, in Mercosur, they're obviously going to lose? Where's the lies? Can you point them out? Because we're having a debate here. I'd like to know what you're talking about.
Muito obrigado pela.
Well, thank you very much for the question. The heart of this agreement is one that guarantees and protects many European sectors. Now, in terms of agriculture, we need to have this debate. We need to look at which subsectors win and lose from this. And if there are certain subsectors that lose out, then we need to find a compensation mechanism at a European level. And this is what's been done over the years. If there is a sector in Europe that's benefited from European support over the years, it has been the agricultural sector. So for many, many decades, that's something that has happened. Now, what is unacceptable is the discourse about the state of agriculture in these countries. I've visited all of them. These countries are democracies, they have rule of law, and the democracies that are concerned with addressing major issues, for example, climate fighting, climate change, etc., etc. Let's not downplay the situation in these countries.
Und schließlich hat jetzt das Wort die Kollegin.
Now I give the floor to Ms. Boras Pavón.
Señor Comisario.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Well, let's tell Europeans the truth. You don't want agriculture, you don't want cattle breeding, you don't want fisheries. Firstly, you came along with your green tyranny, and now you're looking to finish farmers off with the Mercosur agreement. We're now going to see GMO products and all sorts of illegal pharmaceuticals, and none of these products are in line with European standards. I mean, how are we going to compete our more expensive, higher quality beef with cheaper and poor quality South American beef? I mean, we have lost in Spain thousands of farmers over recent years. Europe has lost 5 million. You don't think that's enough? I mean, I'm not sure what's worse. You're talking about sustainability while destroying our rural areas, or you talking about competitiveness while condemning our farming sector to destruction. This is a death sentence for small farmers, for the environment, and also for Europeans' food security. The EPP and the Socialists are applauding this agreement, but we are saying loud and clear, we are not going to sacrifice agriculture to your globalist ambitions. Thank you.
Do you accept that? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Parlerò in italiano. Onorevole Pavón, lei...
Mrs. Pabon, well, you are quite rightly concerned about the destruction of farming. So once again, you're concerned about the destruction of farming. So why don't you say anything about the risk of duties and tariffs that will be placed on agricultural products from Trump's America, on products such as wine? And when that happens, will you be against Trump or against Spanish farmers? Madrid said that Trump is the best leader to build a better Europe. Are you an American patriot or a European patriot?
Señor, el único arancel...
Sir, the only duty that Europe has imposed on itself is the Green Deal. This is a burden on all our farmers, and this is what's really damaging our farms. It's not Trump. Trump is protecting his producers, his national businesses, and his people, which is what Europe should be doing. We are shooting ourselves in the foot and leaving our primary sector, our farmers as well, without protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Vrecionova.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. I understand the concerns of our farmers in respect of tariff duties under this agreement. That is why we need to negotiate and find acceptable solutions. However, I'm deeply convinced that free trade is good for competitiveness. It's good for fair prices for consumers and investments. European companies and farmers are offered new, stable markets, the access to critical materials and new commodities. The agreement also includes standards and control mechanisms. The agreement is also an opportunity for European companies at a time where there is a risk of trade war with the US, where we have Putin's aggression, and China is a security risk. That is why I am in support of this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Mr. Cowan.
Commissioner, colleagues, we face a new global reality today, with countries retreating from trade and turning to protectionism. And amidst this shift, it's natural for the EU to seek new trading partners. In doing so, however, we must continue to uphold our principles by ensuring a level playing field. As it stands, the Mercosur deal lacks key guarantees and imposes demands on Europe's farmers not matched by Mercosur nations. On the whole, for example, Ireland's agricultural industry has 3 strategic goals, all with EU competencies: extending the nitrates derogation, an increased CAP budget, and stopping a Mercosur deal that farmers believe threatens beef exports. If the Commission were to provide meaningful assurances around the Mercosur deal and firm commitments on the derogation in the next CAP, I believe farmers' views could shift. Our country, for example, presently enjoys an 800 million trade surplus with Mercosur nations. This deal has the potential to bring about further opportunities. But good politics is ultimately about compromise. Good politics. And the question now is whether the Commission will prove its political astuteness by strengthening the deal and providing strategic assurances on CAP and the derogation or not. Thank you.
Danke schön. Da spricht nun die Kollegin Hausekamp.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Hausekamp.
Commissaris, elk jaar importeert...
Commissioner, every year Europe imports millions of kilos of horse meat from Uruguay and Argentina. These horses have been seriously mistreated, and they've been treated with hormones and medicine. But then this meat is processed in Europe and turned into bitter balls and other snacks. But instead of stopping this kind of import, you're making this kind of trade of horse meat even easier. And that is one of the many disastrous consequences of this Mercosur deal. There will be more deforestation in order to produce feed and biofuel. How are we going to achieve our climate and biodiversity goals, given that South American farmers use pesticides that we have outlawed in Europe? But because of Mercosur, these dangerous pesticides will end up on our plate. Can I get a commitment from you? Can I get a commitment from you, Commissioner, that you will not import any live animals from Mercosur to our continent? This is my request.
Colleague Hart, do you accept the blue card by colleague Wisniewska? Please. $430, please. Excuse me, you don't have a micro yet. 430, please, a micro.
Okay.
I have a question. What do you think about the Mercosur agreement in the context of the regulation on shortening the supply chain, the regulation which we adopted in the previous mandate, the fork-to-table strategy? How will this impact agriculture in Poland, in Germany? Will this agreement not have a domino effect And the farms, won't they collapse because they will not be able to withstand the competition?
Ja, ik deel uw zorgen. De van boer tot bord strategie.
Share concerns. Farm to fork was clear. More organic farming, less use of pesticides, better animal welfare, more consumption of fruit and vegetables instead of dairy and meat. But Mercosur is the very opposite. Mercosur will lead us to importing more dangerous goods, lowering our standards. We already see that happening. There will be more meat and dairy coming in. There will be more deforestation, more imports of feed. Our farmers and our environment are not going to be served by this Mercosur agreement. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to colleague Pereira.
Tarifas.
Tariffs, is on everyone's tongue right now. Fiat, Volkswagen, and these are some of the most highly sold vehicles in Mercosur. They pay 35% tariffs. And what about our wine, which is recognized around the world? 27%. Reducing or removing tariffs. Would that not be good news? This is something. They also have materials that we need for the energy transition. The Baltic electric grid has been integrated into the European one 3 days ago. What about the European defence system? We want low-level satellites. We want Rafale rather than and Eurofighters rather than F-35s. We want a defence system to be an alternative to the Patriot. Well, Brazil has 89% of certain materials that we need, and Argentina has lithium as well. Can we refuse this agreement? No, we cannot.
Blue card by colleague Tovalieri. Do you accept that? Please. 786. Micro 786, please.
Onorevole Pereira, lei ha...
Mrs. Pereira, you mentioned European car manufacturers, which will be able to finally sell their cars in South America thanks to this agreement. But you don't see that these cars are no longer selling cars in Europe because of policy. Stellantis sales in Europe went down by 36% last year. 30,000 cars sold. For years, they were selling 50,000 a year. And if we don't do away with sanctions in 2025, these businesses are going to struggle to achieve their targets. They're stopping or significantly reducing the production of traditional cars. Their only alternative is to buy certificates from car manufacturers that produce cars outside Europe. The speaker is cut off.
Thank you. Okay, another 10 seconds for the question, please.
Do you not think that before doing away with tariffs on agricultural products, which will flood our markets with low-quality products, just to sell a few extra cars, wouldn't it be better to review our European policies and boost internal demand rather than demand in foreign countries? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question, even though it came at the last minute. Hopefully you know this, but there's a lot of disinformation that comes from your part of the House. There are quotas for the imports of agricultural produce. There are control systems for sanitary systems. And when it comes to, it's about one steak and one chicken breast for each European. That's the forecast for the imports from the Mercosur, because we've also already heard about the guarantees and safeguards from the Commission, which are set out in the agreement for the agricultural sector. We need to understand that we're talking about geopolitics. We are absolutely turned in on ourselves. We need to look for opportunities for economic growth.
Colleague Wisniewska, would you please stick to your time, colleagues, and ask a question? Thanks.
Dziękuję bardzo. Z pani
Thank you very much. What I can see from your speech is the fact that you are very much in favor of our car industry, and it's only about them. So how about food security and health of our Europeans? Is it okay to lose the health safety of our Europeans because we want to support our car manufacturers? What about all those who are going to lose in competitiveness? Can you tell me whether you prefer the car manufacturers to get more money and sacrifice our food and health safety? Because I cannot accept it.
Senhora Deputada, eu agradeço.
Thank you once again for the question. I'll reply very similar to what I said to another colleague. There are quotas for agricultural imports. There's also sanitary controls, so need to respect all of the safeguards and standards that we have for European production. I think it's time to reflect. I think we need to understand that what is in the final text and not have so many reservations. Without this agreement, we will be more dependent on other parts of the world, which can also decide to shut the doors to international trade. And what would you say to the businesses that you represent, and how would they continue to grow at an international level?
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Sargiacomo.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Commissaire, beaucoup de choses.
President, Commissioner, a lot of things have been said. I'm going to focus on the reciprocity conditions, which I think are crucial for fair trade in terms of fair competition, public health, social rights, etc. Now, when it comes to health and safety, if we ban products in Europe because they're carcinogenic or whatever, and we base ourselves on scientific reasons, I mean, we have to ensure that this ban is absolute, because this relates to public health, both here and elsewhere. So therefore, all decision makers, all agreements, all treaties need to include the same standards in those terms, and all products that we in turn, quite apart from random customs checks or maximum pesticide residue levels, I mean, we need to ensure that actually we need appropriate conformity certificates which show that these products are in line with European standards. If we don't have that kind of guarantee, it'll be Europe that's responsible for endangering people's lives both here and elsewhere. Currently, we don't have the conditions to ensure that appropriate checks will be in place, and we can't guarantee people's health. Thank you.
It's finished. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to be the bad guy today, but we are very bad about time, so there is not going to be any other blue card. The catch the eye is closed, and I'm going to be very strict with time if we want to finish at time. Next speaker is Mr. Penel.
Merci, Monsieur le Commissaire. Je voudrais vous parler.
Commissioner, I want to tell you about Patrick, who rears chickens in Brittany. He works throughout the day, and then, once he's done his work on the farm, he's got 160 pages of paperwork he's got to do. His income has gone down, but his costs have gone up. Pedro, on the other hand, is a farmer from Brazil, and he can sell his chicken at a low price in Europe. But Pedro doesn't have to comply with the same animal welfare standards. He uses pesticides on his maize and growth promoters. And Patrick's questions and concerns have fallen on deaf ears. So, Patrick says, how dare you impose something so unfair on him? He said to me, pass this message on to the Commissioner. I don't believe in Europe anymore. That's what Patrick says.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, today I'm referring to you with a resolution that we should not be accepting produce that is not in line with European produce for European farmers. This Mercosur agreement drives unfair competition. Look at the price we're going to pay by eating food full of pesticides and no guarantees. We are jeopardizing our health. What hypocrisy, ladies and gentlemen. We are smothering our farmers with regulation, and then we have trade agreements which favour other countries with different standards. Who's going to benefit from this? It's time to change this situation and draw up agreements which are beneficial for everyone. We also need to defend the health and well-being of our citizens. Our rural areas do not want to live on handouts.
Madam Katainen, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, it's obvious that the EU must strengthen its competitiveness, and this is a very good goal, this Mercosur agreement. However, we have to change our markets and increase our independency. But it's also good to think whether we are endangering one of our cornerstones, self-sufficiency in top-quality food production. European farmers create the best quality but suffer from low productivity because there are too high standards imposed upon them. Standards are European responsibility, and we have to bear our responsibility for our agriculture in every situation. We cannot work in a union of double standards, not even with the Mercosur agreement. The Commission has promised to support European farmers and protect our consumers from foodstuffs filled with hormones. But is this all enough? So you are going to prevent a situation where our small farmers are faced with unfair competition and protect European self-sufficiency regarding high-quality food.
President, Commissioner, the EU-Mercosur trade agreement prepared behind farmers' backs is not an opportunity. And I say this, and I'm really sorry, it's a death sentence for European agriculture. Mercosur is a black hail cloud that will destroy small family farms which are already struggling. The Polish market was flooded with cheap and bad agricultural produce from Ukraine. It's like a kind of a Eastern Mercosur. In addition, Polish farmers are subject to the most stringent restrictions. The introduction onto our markets of products such as grain, meat, tobacco from Mercosur countries, where quality and prices are lower, will kill Polish agriculture. It threatens food security and public health. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Polish and European farmers, I ask you for solidarity in protecting the agricultural market, consumer health and food security. We say no to low-quality products. We say no to the dangerous Mercosur agreement.
El siguiente orador es el señor Moreno.
The next speaker is Mr. Moreno.
Gracias, querido bad guy.
Thank you, bad guy, aka President. Well, Trump has kicked the world trade system. We know that we need, therefore, to deepen ties with the Mercosur countries. Those are countries that we share values, principles, interests and cultures with. These countries must continue to be our allies. They must not be the scapegoat for populists, as CETA, the Canada agreement, was. There are opportunities here and threats for farmers, but we need to react to farmers by providing support, particularly in sensitive sectors. This is a market of some 700 million euros, and there will be access to some 200 million consumers for our SMEs. We will be opening up tenders, and we must also not forget that at the moment we don't have joint sanitary rules, but those will be brought in by this agreement. We as the Spanish Socialists believe that this is a vital agreement that must be passed.
Our next speaker is Madame Tovaglieri.
Ancora una volta il Made in Italy.
Well, once again, Made in Italy is in danger as a result of Europe. This free trade agreement with Mercosur risks causing uncalculable and irreversible damage to our farmers, but also to our citizens. It will do away with 92% of European customs duties on imports from these countries. But unfortunately, we're going to find ourselves importing products that are lower quality than European products and also with lower sanitary standards. In addition, they're going to be sold at basement bargain prices. They're going to damage our producers and risk the health of our citizens. And once again, it'll be farmers and consumers who pay the costs of these crazy Brussels policies.
And then I'd give the floor to Ms. Aguirre Martinez. Mr. President, Commissioner, for 20 years now we've been negotiating this agreement, and this shows how complex it is and the efforts that have been required in relation to transparency and working with the different sectors. It seems there's going to be benefits in a range of different areas, for example, cars, wines, dairy, and certain other subsectors. But we do have another part of society which is concerned, and there's also problems that still affecting from the CAP reform. There's obviously no guarantee of the Paris Agreement, the use of hormones. There's also, we need clarity in relation to those products who are protected, and also when there's a gradual opening up of the market. And on all of these points, we need to have a joint working group so that when this agreement comes to the Parliament, we need to be able to vote on this. This cannot be a war between different sectors of the economy, but we need to look at balanced opportunities. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Thoida, you now have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. In the US, tariffs, China, unfair competition, and in Russia, plain war. If we look at the situation, what I've just described is what we're facing. For Europe, trade has always been an economic tool, but for Xi Jinping, Trump and Putin, it's a political weapon. And our prosperity and security are being jeopardized. As a result, we urgently need new markets. Mercosur is an opportunity for our exporters, and we can diversify our supply chain on top of that. However, we must not commit the mistakes of the past. We must not sacrifice our farmers and livestock producers. We need to give them guarantees. I therefore welcome the fact that there are safeguards and reciprocity measures which will protect our primary sector. Even more importantly, the Commission wants to reduce green red tape and wants to simplify. That's all very good.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Mr. Nadella, please.
Colleghi, signor Commissario.
Colleagues, Commissioner, well, we have a new geopolitical framework subsequent to the US elections, and the Chinese are getting more assertive. But I think that means that we have to boost our commitment to international markets. We have to be leaders in trade. Europe lives off trade. 30% of our GDP is linked to exports, and that is even more the case for my country, Italy. So therefore, in theory, the Mercosur agreement would be a useful tool, particularly for industrial sectors, chemicals, cars, machinery. However, Commissioner, there may well be serious problems here for agriculture, so that there are things that the Commission needs to do. We need reciprocity, we need checks with European customs, and then we also need promotional resources. You can't cut the CAP and promote Mercosur. In addition, this €1 billion compensation fund, is that going to be there or not? We also need respect for environmental standards. We need this agreement to be a good one. Thank you.
Voorzitter, commissaris, collega's.
Mr. President, Commissioner, colleagues, the Mercosur agreement offers opportunities but also many risks. Our farmers are overwhelmed with regulation, and imports from South America are going to worsen this situation. The Commission's report says that in Brazil, the use of hormones in meat will be banned, but so it seems to be all under control, but we just don't believe it. In the Netherlands, there's economic growth of 0.0%. We have farmers who need support. The Mercosur benefits, the trade agreement will go to the farmers in Brazil. This won't lead to fair competition. This is a crazy agreement. Please just delete it. Get rid of it, Mr. Commissioner. Support our farmers and get them out of this bureaucratic waste.
Thank you, President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. Let's be clear about what's really at stake with the Mercosur agreement. It's not just Europe's economic future, it's our international credibility after stalling this deal for more than 20 years. It's about where we stand in a world where the global balance of powers is shifting and Europe is struggling to defend its interests. Some warn of threats to our industry and farmers. They're missing the crucial point. Our economy doesn't struggle because of international competition. It struggles under the weight of excessive regulatory burdens. This agreement cuts tariffs on key European exports while maintaining environmental standards. It gives small and medium enterprises, the backbone of our economy, access to new opportunities in a market of nearly 300 million consumers. Yet, some prefer to walk away because they fear competition. Here's a real threat, not competition, but risk aversion, not trade, but excessive bureaucracy. We burden our businesses with excessive regulations, and then we wonder why we struggle globally. While we hesitate, China is acting fast, already replaced Europe as South America's primary trading partner. The path to European competitiveness isn't through isolation, it's through strategic engagement.
Obrigado. Señor De Meo.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Well, the Mercosur trade agreement is a strategic opportunity because it looks to boost European competitiveness, diversifying our supply chains and reducing our dependency on other markets. However, there are risks as well, particularly for the agro-food sector, and we really need to look at those carefully before we finally approve the agreement. Our farms have to respect very high standards in terms of environmental sustainability, animal well-being, quality, etc. And that's not the case for Mercosur farms. So therefore, we need rigorous controls to ensure that imports stick to appropriate standards and that we don't face unfair competition. We also need to ensure that GI products in Europe are safeguarded. You can't simply build a better Europe by opening markets. You need to ensure that we have high-quality products and businesses as well. This agreement will be a good one if it guarantees new opportunities without sacrificing our food security and the future of our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pajín, please.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Mercosur agreement is very important in trade terms, but Above all, it's also important in geopolitical terms. For months, we've been talking about the need for strategic autonomy in the EU, but who are we going to link up with? We need to link up with South America because they have so many shared bonds, and therefore it's absolutely important to talk about what is in this agreement. Yes, because we are sensitive to environmental standards. That's why we have to say that there are binding commitments to protection of forests and nature. We also need to be aware of the social issues. That's why we need to say quite clearly that it protects labour rights, gender equality, the rights of indigenous persons, and also small-scale farmers. And also, there's the citrus fruits is quite important, and also the clauses and there's certain other instruments, for example, safeguard clauses that we're going to use to defend a good agreement for the interests of our farmers on both sides.
Madame Bonte.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Beste commissaris, beste collega's. Ja, het Mercosur-akkoord zal onze Europese...
Colleagues, the Mercosur agreement will have an impact on farming. It will hit the agri-sector hard. We've already got the Green Deal, and we've got green NGOs who are financed by the European Commission. This is going to bring down what was built up by farmers over generation. The Green Deal means that farmers have to change their business model, and some are even shutting shop. Now we have the final death blow caused by Mercosur. Why would we want milk, dairy, poultry, and beef being flown in from halfway around the world from Mercosur? We've already got the highest standards here. Why would millions of our farms be jeopardized like this? The market is being upset and brought out of balance by this agreement. Farmers are affected, and smaller farmers will be affected the most. Let's end this madness.
L'intérêt géostratégique d'arrimer...
The geostrategic interests are clear here, linking up with Mercosur, given the ongoing trade war in the world. But this is there are problems, massive inflation, which is causing problems for farmers, and a lack of competitiveness, which weighs on people's mental health and their financial health as well. And then we have regulators and institutions who think about producing rather than regulating. So, Commissioner, what is going to happen when Argentina leaves the Paris agreements, as they've announced? What about this rebalancing mechanism? This is going to directly threaten the legal sovereignty of the EU and member states. What are you going to do when you say, because you say that this agreement is democratic, but you're not letting national parliaments have their say? You have this billion compensation fund. Is this just a way of buying yourself a good conscience on the backs of farmers? Our farmers are going to be destroyed by unfair competition. Thank you.
10 requests for Catch the Eye. I'm going to attend all of them because I think it's fair. But in the next debate, I will not admit any blue card, and I will not open the Catch the Eye. I have to say from my side that I think that this debate should have been much more longer, that we've been debating lots of things during the past days, and I think that issues should have had much more time than we have had. So I'm going to attend the 17 requests for Catch the Eye. I beg all the speakers to respect 1 minute, because I will cut all of them at the minute. First one is my dear colleague, Madame Camberry.
Thank you, Chair. Free and open trade is crucial for both Ireland and Europe, but I want to again raise my concerns on Mercosur trade agreement around traceability and the need for a level playing field for our farmers and food producers. A recent Eurobarometer survey highlights the fact that 88% of Europeans agree that agricultural imports of any origin should only enter the EU if their production has complied with EU environmental, animal welfare and labour standards. This shows that Europeans, as consumers, value the work we do here to protect high standards and ensure traceability and sustainability. One of the greatest strengths of the European Union is its high standards in traceability and food security. We have a duty to ensure that all products coming into the EU meet these standards. Irish farmers are proud of their product and are committed to upholding high standards, but also expect to be on a level playing field with their competition. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague. Mr. Andriukaitis.
Thank you, dear Chairman. Dear Commissioner, dear Maras, colleagues, I heard a lot of misinformation and lies when we are speaking about sanitary and phytosanitary standards. Colleagues, European sanitary and phytosanitary standards are not negotiable. The EU has very stringent standards to protect human, animal and plant health. And any product sold in the EU must comply with European Union standards. I, being Commissioner for Food Safety and Health, I know very well that it remains unrelated and unalterated regardless of trade agreement. EU animal, plant and health and food safety import controls is very strict, and we can control all third countries. It doesn't matter which agreement is. I welcome this Mercosur agreement because I was involved in 2019. Of course, Paris Agreement and trade and sustainable development inclusion is very well done, and we need to go forward and see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. El siguiente es el señor Solier.
The next speaker is Solier.
Gracias, presidente. Comisario.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner, so what is in this Mercosur agreement is selling our selling our industrial products in exchange for produce which has been pumped full of drugs. So this is the same as allowing products in from Morocco without any checks. So we're selling the health of our citizens for our industry, or are we going to protect our farmers so they comply with the same rules and maintain their production? Do we want to hand over to others the power of what our children are going to eat? Thank you very much.
Zwei, seat 184.
Madame.
Sorry, Madame. Sorry.
Chers collègues, Monsieur le Commissaire.
Colleagues, Commissioner, are you aware of estradiol 17? It's a steroid-based hormone produced by the placenta and follicles in the body, but it's used to fatten animals. In 2013, residues of this were found in surface water and in our bodies. Wisely, it has been banned in Europe, and we can't bring in meat which contains it. Estrogen 17 can lead to breast cancer development. It's actually the biggest cause of cancer among people who don't smoke. Last month we heard from the Commission saying that the Mercosur countries do use estradiol and that there was failings in their checks. What are you going to do? Are you going to establish a compensation fund to deal with this hormone? At the moment, well, I mean, there's no way to help these women whose lives have been affected.
Señor Oliveira, seat 302.
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Mercosur agreement is both good and bad. It's good for multinationals of the agro-industry, but it's bad for small and medium-sized farmers and consumers. It's good for large industrial groups in the EU who have now opened up the markets of Latin America, but it's bad for so many countries which won't be able to develop their own industrial agreement. It's a good agreement for large service sector and multinationals who now can access government procurement in Latin America, but it's bad for small and medium farmers and businesses and everyone who operate in a good way. There will see the markets flooded with cheaper produce because they've been produced under different conditions. If this agreement is good for bad, it's good for a small minority and bad for everyone else. So we need to ensure that there's full scrutiny. So that's why we cannot agree with this agreement.
Mr. Brown, seat 857.
So, I just want to express my immense gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for making my work so much easier. It's much easier for me to explain to my compatriots, Polish workers, not only in agriculture, also in mining, how dangerous the European Union is. It's much easier for me, after your Mercosur deal, to explain that you're about to devastate, demolish, destroy all our normal life. So thank you very much, Reichsführerin von der Leyen. Thank you very much, Reichstag Präsidentin Metsola. Thanks. Thanks. You are being very helpful.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Señor Sousa. Seat 674.
Senhor Presidente, Senhor Comissário.
President, Commissioner, the Mercosur agreement is a fair agreement, a balanced agreement, and a good agreement in geopolitical, economic and social terms. There are no doubts. This is a good agreement for industry. We need to have guarantees, however, for the agri-sector. We have additional guarantees in the ultimate iteration of the agreement. There will be a gradual phasing in of the implementation. There will be maximum TRQs for beef meat, and there will be potential support if farmers were to be affected. There will be special protection of some 350 goods and special treatment of Mercosur goods that don't comply with our SPS and environmental rules. Then it also includes provisions on the Paris Agreement and on illegal logging. The Commission has done a really good job. It took us 20 years to get this over the finish line. So now stop with your lies. Let's speed this up. Let's sign this agreement.
Obrigado. La señora Maestre, seat 181.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Well, the question we need to be asking ourselves is, do we want to be a strong power or do we want to isolate ourselves in a competitive world? Do we want to be an industrial continent, or do we want to give markets to the US or China? Do we want to be paying high tariffs, or do we want to open up free markets? We are in a difficult situation. The far right support Trump's tariffs, but they don't want to see an open market in Latin America. This is something they're going to have to explain. Now, we also need to provide guarantees to our sensitive sectors. We need certainty and transparency for our farmers. We have to boost safeguard measures for sensitive sectors. We would like to see more controls at the border to ensure that the quotas established are complied with. And obviously, we need to protect our sensitive products. And above all, you should tell us where this compensation fund money is going to come from, and is it going to be enough? Thank you.
Señora Miranda, seat 186.
Muito obrigada, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Commissioner said that agricultural produce need to meet EU rules, and how will this be guaranteed? The EU-Mercosur agreement is beneficial for all. Well, it's not beneficial for meat farmers or dairy farmers in Galicia. Is it beneficial for smaller, medium farmers? No. You said that there's that many farmers will have to shut up shop, have been forced to shut up shop in Galicia over the past 20 years. Well, geopolitical, the interests of multinationals cannot be used to crush our farming. The EPP and local authorities voted against looking at the impacts at a local level, so people are being paid to disappear, but not with our votes.
Obrigado, señora Miranda. Mr. Nicolau Alavos, seat 810.
During this day, the farmers in Greece, they are struggling and they're fighting to stay on their lands. It's something that becomes intolerable due to the common agricultural policies, the very low prices imposed by the big companies. They cannot protect it by the various destructions. And this is because of the economic politics of the European Union. And now the situation worsens due to the agreements of the Mercosur type that will increase the import of farming products, and this will be to the detriment of the income of the farmers. Against this policy of the government, against the lower standards, the farmers are fighting for the survival. They're claiming a lowering of the production cost with the state intervention, not to tax the petrol they use. They should reduce the price of electricity, 100% of reimbursement and guarantee for their products to have a stable income and to have full services.
Seat 752.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, farmers in Ireland are extremely worried about the prospect of additional tonnes of meat produced at lower costs and poorer environmental standards entering our EU, in direct competition with local meat produced to the highest of European standards we set here for them. As an island nation, Irish farmers know more than most how important trade is, especially in current political landscape, and there can be no support without concrete answers to questions below. How do we protect the interests of our farmers and rural communities and ensure that farmers actually benefit from this trade deal? How do we guarantee that there's no unfair competition and that our farmers are not left behind in the global market? And how do we ensure that farmers on both sides of the Atlantic meet the same environmental and quality standards? We must negotiate safeguards to ensure that Irish and European farming remains competitive, resilient and fair. The farmers deserve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Wells. Our next speaker is Mr. Buda, seat 337. Buda Daniel.
Domnule președinte, stimați colegi.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, this debate on the Mercosur agreement raises a lot of emotions and a lot of questions that have not yet been given clear answers. But it is a fact that while European farmers have to follow the strictest environmental rules, in other parts of the world, these rules simply do not exist. Europe has a duty to protect its farmers and to provide them with sound guarantees that they can continue their activity. We should not sacrifice them on the altar of uncertainty, war and floods. They are not asking for preferential treatment. They are asking for the right to compete fairly. The compensations that are to be given farmers must be accompanied by a relaxation of the rules in agriculture. And this agreement must be equitable, must create true trade opportunities and not to destroy European agriculture. We need to find the best solutions for consumers and farmers.
Seat 234.
Monsieur le commissaire, chers collègues.
Commissioner, colleagues, have the latest negotiations improved the EU-Mercosur agreement? Well, the answer to that is yes, but no effort that we make to continue to improve the agreement will change the fact that a free trade agreement is sometimes good for consumers and some sectors, but there's always a whole series of losers, and no compensation fund will be able to make up for that. A free trade agreement is a loss of sovereignty, and we've seen that in Trump's decisions when the benefits are not on your side, then you end up suffering blackmail. Free trade agreement means more freedom to trade, but less collective freedom to choose. In Europe, we put people first, and that will be in danger. So yes, we want a partnership with Mercosur, but there are many other ways of doing it than this agreement.
Caria, seat 845.
The agreement EU-Mercosur is presented as an occasion, a chance for European companies, but we should speak clearly. First of all, here we're not the European Parliament of multinationals. Also, the multinationals increase their profits through such an agreement, but the European farmers and the animal breeders have a very high competition. What do our citizens gain? Cheaper products of doubtful quality that do not fulfill the standards of the European Union. Will we agree to fill our supermarkets with products that are produced with various substances that are not allowed without any environmental responsibility, and having the deforestation of the Amazon continuing? We will accept products coming from animals that have been raised under conditions that are inhuman for Europeans. Do you want to make an agreement? Make an agreement with the European farmers. Their requests are just. They want just prices, reduction of the production cost, and protection from various disasters.
Madam. Next speaker, Madam Van Leuven, seat 750.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I will continue in Dutch. Voorzitter, de positie van BBB is bekend. Wij kunnen...
Thank you. Well, we need to look at the situation of farmers in the Netherlands. And in fact, it's well known. We complain because our farmers have to meet to much higher standards than those applied in South America. We know that the standards are not being met when it comes to sanitary or phytosanitary measures. We want healthy produce, healthy products on our tables. Farming is strategically important, and it doesn't take this into account our requirements.
Seat 720.
Hvala, predsjedavajući. Pa kad
Thank you. When we talk about Mercosur, we have to take into consideration the specificities of certain countries like Croatia, where most of the agricultural farmers are small farms. So those who raise animals, also viniculture, we are opening a large market for the wine industry of a big area, the area of Mercosur. We are going to be probably flooded with cheap wines of dubious quality from Latin America, and the wine sector are now facing big problems like pests, and this can really affect small companies in Croatia that wants to develop its autochthonous sorts of wine.
Our dear colleague, Mr. Kelly. Seat 106.
Thank you, President, and thank you for giving us the floor. As you said, this debate is very important.
Against everything. But there are also many speakers here this morning who are pro-trade but say they cannot support Mercosur in its current form. That would reflect the position of the new Irish government, made up of a coalition of Renew and EPP, and I think it needs to be addressed very strongly by the Commission. There are issues like deforestation, sustainability, production standards, especially in Brazil, and then the effect, especially on farmers, beef farmers, who feel that they will be decimated if Mercosur goes ahead. So the Commission has a job to do to convince them otherwise, give them proper compensation if that is needed, and also look at a package that might include other issues they're concerned about, especially the reform of CAP, etc. Commissioner Šefčovič, you did a great job in relation to Brexit. Now is the chance for you to step up here. I'm very confident you will.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Does the Commissioner want to close the debate?
Thank you very much, Mr. President, honourable members of the European Parliament. I was privileged to attend three very politically charged, very politically dynamic debates this week, and I want to thank many of you for highlighting that in this geopolitical era, the free trade agreement with Mercosur, as Mr. Lange has underlined, will greatly contribute to our social welfare state. It will create new jobs and open new opportunities for all sectors of our economy, including for our farmers and for our agri-food sectors. Moreover, it's also good for environment and sustainability. Let me underline that in all aspects, we are much better off with the agreement than without it. This agreement binds the Mercosur countries to strong commitments on the fight against deforestation, and it gives us an important platform for cooperation on our climate ambition. On top of this, overall benefit of this agreement is also good for our farmers and agriculture community. As some of you know, I consulted widely with farmers, with small farmers, family farmers, organic farmers, and also big farmers as well. And 2 weeks ago, I was with many of you, together with the Commissioner for Agriculture, Mr. Hansen, in the discussion on this precise issue in Agriculture Committee of this House. And I do all this because I have utmost respect for our farmers, and I have utmost respect for the debate we have in this House. And I know how crucial a role our farmers are playing in the area of our food security, on our food sovereignty, and of course for the welfare of our society. Honourable members, I was surprised that Madam Aubry asked me how did I dare to come here to defend this agreement. I came because you invited me. And I would always be here when you invite me. Because I respect this House, I respect the democratic debate, and despite of the charged debate we had here today, I am proud of this agreement, and I believe that through the discussions, through the explaining, through presenting facts and figures, we can convince majority, most of you, that we indeed do the right job. In this debate, we unfortunately didn't cover the fact that this agreement is actually the biggest free trade agreement the EU ever concluded. Just for your information, this FTA is 4 times bigger than our free trade agreement with Japan. We also overlooked the important signal we are sending out in this difficult time where the trade barriers are being erected again, and we discussed it on Tuesday, and also in the time where we are losing our privileged relationship with a country so close to us, historically, culturally, economically, like the countries of Mercosur, to China. Unfortunately, we didn't mention at all strategic importance of the supply of critical raw materials and opportunities these deals open for our businesses, and the need to diversify our economic relations. The debate almost completely focused on agriculture, so let's look at this again. As you know, the EU is agri-food export superpower. Last year, our farmers exported products of the value of 228 billion euros. And our farmers and our agri-food exports have trade surplus of 70 billion euros. 70 billion euros. Can you imagine how our farmers would do without these export opportunities. Do you believe that we would be able to be so strong in exports if the largest network of our FTAs would not open these new markets for all of them? Big farmers, small farmers, our agri-food sector. Into Mercosur itself, our farmers are already now exporting more than 3.2 billion euros of products. And they managed to do it with import duties which are up to 35% more than they should be, and without any protection for our GIs. And this agreement is going to eliminate these import duties. It's going to protect our GIs, so there will be no imitation of our famous cheeses, our wines and spirits, and I believe that this would greatly improve export opportunities for our farmers. Mr. Coburn and Mr. Kelly have been asking and highlighting the importance of strategic discussion on agriculture. And the Commission is absolutely prepared for this. The Commissioner Hansen is working on the new strategic vision on agriculture, and I can tell you that we do our utmost to look into all possible ways how to lower reporting obligations for our farmers, how to cut the red tape for our farmers, so the farmer to which one of the honourable members was referring as Patrick would have an easier life. But I'm also convinced that this debate we have right now, for the benefit of Patrick and all other farmers, should be based on true facts and figures. And I want to be very clear that the food products in the European Union, being domestically produced or imported, must comply with the EU sanitary and phytosanitary rules, including the EU strict policies on the GMOs. And the Commission conducts regular audits in third countries and works closely with the Member States' authorities that perform official controls and enforcement activities on imported food to ensure that non-compliant products cannot enter the EU market. Member States, of course, are looking in a great detail into this agreement, and they're also carrying out their own audits and their own studies. And there was quite a few honourable members from Ireland who intervened in this debate, and therefore I think that they should also look at the study which was commissioned by the Irish government. And it was done by the Independent Economic and Sustainability Impact Assessment on Ireland and the Mercosur Agreement. And this independent study forecast an increase in Ireland exports to Mercosur by 17% and increase of imports of 12%. It will increase manufacturing export of Ireland by 1.4 billion and agri-food export by 10 to 20 million. And we will be very happy from the Commission side to have this discussion with every single member state, because we have the figures, we have convincing argument, and we are open for this open, frank, and debate which would truly be based on the facts. I would also kindly ask you not to spread the information which is simply not true. And I totally agree with Madam Pereira, who was calling for this. No import of hormone beef, no chloride chicken will ever be imported to the European Union. Mr. Andriukaitis was working on that for 5 years, and he was absolutely crystal clear on that. The problem Madam Zbai was referring to was spotted and immediately resolved. And this type of the beef has never entered into the EU market and never will. We do inspection regularly, and we also control at the import. On the so-called non-violation complaint instrument, which I explained many times, but I'm happy to do it again. It's not new. It's fully compatible on WTO framework. And this instrument is only forward-looking and addresses effects that could not be foreseeable at the time of the conclusion. So it doesn't concern the CBAM. It doesn't concern any of the law, any acquis which are valid right now, which already entered into force. And I'm sure that Madam Brinkman knows about it. So under no circumstances, our regulatory freedom is and will be affected. So let's not use this argument anymore. To conclude, Mr. President, honourable members, I would like to thank you for this debate, and I'm ready to continue the discussion with you, with the farmers, and with all stakeholders. At the same time, I believe that we would advance our debate and do better service to our citizens, to our farmers, if we respect true facts, if we speak about real figures, and if we stay true to what was really agreed, and not to repeat in every debate the things which are simply not true. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I'm sorry because I've been so strict with time, but I insist that this debate should have had much more time. The debate is closed. In the next debate, I will follow the same rules. I'm not going to give any blue card. I'm not going to open the catch the eye, and I'm going to be very strict with the time of the speakers. It is Commission statement, threats to EU sovereignty, thought strategic dependencies in communication infrastructure. I give the floor in first place to Commissioner Mr. Mikalev.